What's up, everyone? Aaron Nagler here for PackersNews.com, live on Facebook late in the evening on Tuesday. No real Packers news, but as always, at least until the Super Bowl happens, I thought I'd jump on here day in and day out and see what's on your minds. We got the Senior Bowl in full effect. Started this day earlier today. Our Michael Cohen is down there. He'll have dispatches from mobile throughout the week at PackersNews.com starting tomorrow on Wednesday morning, so make sure you're following that. I'll be speaking to Michael for videos for Packers News throughout the week, so make sure you're checking all of that starting Wednesday at PackersNews.com. In the meantime, thought I'd jump on, say hi to you fine folks, see what's up. I see some of you have already joined and saying hello to all of you. I've been relegated to the outside, even though it is still a little chilly outside, but it was a nice day in New York today, but it's getting a little chillier. But I have to go outside because I'm in a home full of sick children. All of my girls have got some form of flu or cold, and they're all in various bedrooms, and one is lying in the living room sofa. So I have nowhere to go other than out back in the friendly confines of the Nagler, Shea Nagler, modus operandi outside. So thought I'd jump on here, talk to you fine folks, see what's on your minds, Packers-wise. Chris starts us off by saying, so glad the Vikes lost. I'm sure there are a lot of Packer fans out there who are very, very happy that the Vikings lost the NFC Championship game. Their second blowout in the last 3 tries, really. Thinking back to that blowout against the Giants, 41-0 back in the day. Just haven't had much luck there for the Vikings. But obviously now, especially going forward, they're kind of thrown into turmoil at the quarterback position. Don't really know what they're going to do there. So that'll be something to watch, especially for the Packers, who could probably use with an influx of veteran kind of competition/talent, as we talked about yesterday, at the quarterback spot. Marcus Davenport's highlights look like he'll be picked before 14. Davenport has been kind of mocked everywhere from top 10 to kind of late in the first round. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's gone. I wouldn't be surprised if he's available for the Packers at 14. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Packers passed on him. I really like him. I know there are questions about the competition level, but the man can only beat the people in front of him. I mean, everybody say hi to the train going by in a little... There it goes. Heading out of New York City, adventuring out to wherever they're headed in this great land of ours. But, Khalil Mack had many of the same concerns about competition levels, and these guys, they can only beat who's put in front of them, and Davenport for the most part did most of that. Guys put in front of him, he beat them. So I was asked earlier today on Twitter if I would take Davenport at 14, and yes, I think the Packers, if they've pulled that trigger, that would be a good pick. Hi, Trey. Yes, Josh Jackson. Josh, yes. And I don't think you're just saying that because of the name affiliation there. Josh Jackson would be a fine pick. Another guy you've seen mocked to the Packers a few times. It'll be interesting to see how things play out now throughout the draft season, the industrial draft complex, as I like to call it. Senior Bowl is in full swing now. Just had the East-West Shrine game. Combine's coming up at the end of the month, at the end of February. So all of that will be information gathering for the Packers and for all these prospects. We'll see. It'll be interesting to see how Josh Jackson fares throughout all of that. Lamar Jackson back up for Aaron Rodgers. I'll tell you what, I love Lamar Jackson as a prospect, and I know there are lots of questions about his transitioning to the NFL. I know Bill Polian, caused some waves the other day suggesting he should be switched to wide receiver. I think he'd make a very good NFL quarterback for a team that can be creative on the offensive side of the ball. I don't think he's your classic drop-back passer, but I don't think you need to be. If anything, you need to be able to move the ball, move the chains, put points on the board, and I think Lamar Jackson can do that for you. Obviously, there are going to be concerns about his frame and about his his running ability, possibly leading to injury. But I tell you what, if you can get creative with him on the offensive side of the ball, and you can put him in a position, much like we've seen the Eagles do with Nick Foles, I think Lamar Jackson could do anything you ask Nick Foles to do against that Vikings defense, the #1 defense in the NFL. This is a question of getting him to the NFL on the right staff. Are the Packers that team? Mike McCarthy and company, are they the right staff? I'd love to watch that happen. Now, do I think that's going to happen? I tend to think Lamar Jackson's going to go in the first round, and I don't think the Packers are going to pull that trigger, but I would love to see it happen. Opinion of Allison. No, that's a good question. I think Geronimo had a good year, a solid year. I don't think he had... I wouldn't characterize it as a year where he took the step maybe the Packers were hoping for. You saw drops. You saw him kind of have a bunch of miscommunication, whether it was Hundley or Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. I think you would have liked to have seen a little bit more polish from him in his second year. Now, that said, he doesn't get a whole lot of opportunities as the number 4 guy. Even number 5 sometimes when you throw the tight end in the mix. And I do think he is a talent. I do think Rodgers loves throwing to him, and there's something to be said for that. And I do think bringing him back next year and putting him in the rotation and seeing what he's got for one more year is obviously a no-brainer. But I also don't think they can really count on him going forward, and or if they're planning on, say, jettisoning Jordy Nelson, I don't think that's going to happen. But let's say they do, I don't think Geronimo Allison is your long-term answer. And I know the guy plays his heart out. I think he is talented, and he is definitely an asset on the offensive side of the ball, but I don't see him as a long-term solution starting wide receiver in the NFL. Josh Jackson, Darwin James, and Vita Vea. I tell you what, I put it up on Twitter a little earlier. Vita Vea, I think, if he's sitting there at 14, for those of you who don't know, he's a defensive tackle out of Washington. If he's sitting there at 14, the Packers seriously have to consider him. And I understand the trepidation of taking a defensive lineman at 14. But to me, he's right in the mold of like a Star Lotulelei or a Haloti Ngata, who also both dropped. I think Star was actually taken at 14. I think Ngata was taken at 12. And both of them probably should have been taken in the top 10. And I think the same thing of Vea. I think he should probably be taken in the top 10. Probably won't be. Just because teams get enamored with these position players and quarterbacks and speed and etc. But look, this game is won in the trenches. And the Packers have 2 good trench players in Kenny Clark and Mike Daniels. There's no doubt about that. I think Dean Lowry is a serviceable player, maybe just above, a good player, but I don't think he's a difference maker. And I do think Vea could be. And on a team that is now employing a new scheme and that is traditionally like to use 2 and 3 down linemen multiple ways, as opposed to Dom Capers, who used 2 D linemen 90% of the time, I think, and given the injury history along the Packers side of the ledger, it just makes a lot of sense to fortify that defensive front. I mean, it's a game where it's won in the trenches. Look at the teams that are playing in the Super Bowl. Look at how the Eagles got to the Super Bowl. They have probably arguably the best offensive line in the league and probably arguably the best defensive line in the league. And that didn't just happen by, waiting and drafting late and signing street free agents. Those are some premium picks used on both of those sides of the ball. So, again, I think it would be great depth. It'd be great ability to control the line of scrimmage, and I think he makes a lot of sense. Just got here. What did I miss? Kyle, nothing. Just me babbling. Pass rush and secondary plus tight end. Jordan, yeah, I think those are all things that need to be addressed, but you have to remember there are 7 rounds. The Packers have 10 plus 11 picks. We'll see how it all shakes out, but you can address everything in one pick, obviously, and you should view that first pick as a long-term investment. Dave, thanks for joining, man. A lot of good pass rushers in the league. Agreed. Did Green Bay get their signing bonus money back? Oh, I imagine you're talking about Martellus Bennett. No word on that yet. I haven't even heard when there's going to be a hearing on it. But I got to imagine that it'll be taken into account and or taken care of prior to the start of the new league year, which will be in March. Where is veteran presence needed? Samuel, that's a good question. If you're talking positionally, I would say, I don't know, maybe at corner, maybe at tight end. they've got a good disbursement, so to speak, of experience. But I don't really see one position in particular crying out for veteran leadership. But if there was a spot, maybe at corner. But that's why they brought Devon House in, although he is set to be a free agent. Are there any Reggie White type free agents coming up in free agency? No. Simply put, Reggie White changed everything in Green Bay, changed everything in the landscape of the NFL. He was a once-in-a-lifetime prospect to hit free agency. The likes of Reggie White hitting free agency will never be seen again. Is Josh Jones an inside linebacker next year? Every down player or limited as a run stopper? I don't think he has to be limited as, say, like only a first and second down back, or a second down player. I do think he's much more effective closer to the line of scrimmage, asked to take on either blockers or rushing the quarterback or tracking backers out of the backfield, etc. I do think he's better the closer he gets to the line of scrimmage. The more space he's given, the more tentative he looks. Now, some of that is the scheme. Some of that is what he was asked to do by Don Capers and company. And some of that was out of necessity due to injury. I am very interested to see how Mike Pettin lines him up and utilizes his skill set, because I do think there's a big-time place for him in the NFL, close to the line of scrimmage, wreaking havoc not only on blocking schemes but on quarterbacks and people trying to catch the football near the line of scrimmage. Think we pick up a running backs at some point since we had so many injuries? I actually kind of doubt it. Obviously they've used 3 picks there in the draft last year. Ty Montgomery is coming back, although as you can point out there, he was injured. It's really hard to say because we don't have a track record to go off of when it comes to Gutekunst, the new general manager. You looked at Ted Thompson, you had 13 years to draw from as far as what he liked to do, what his tendencies were. Now we don't have any of that with Gutekunst. So I want to say I doubt it, but you never know. I mean, maybe Gutekunst thinks, he looks at the running back landscape across the NFL and thinks we need a great running back to compete for a Super Bowl. And then he goes out and either drafts or trades for or, signs in free agency a star running back. I don't know. I don't know how he's going to operate. And that's kind of one of the most intriguing aspects of this offseason is how Brian Gutekunst is going to not only A, attack things like free agency in the draft, but B, how he is going to evaluate the roster that's been handed to him, where he is going to deem okay, this is dead weight, this has to be improved, this guy isn't pulling his weight, etc., and what actions he will take that he thinks is going to improve at those positions. Do we see Green Bay making a move for any Seattle prospects because of the defensive coordinator's recent past? For anyone who doesn't know, Mike Pettin spent last year as a consultant with the Seahawks. I guess it's a possibility. I mean, I don't see anyone that they specifically target, but it's always a possibility. That's a lot of, it's funny because the league obviously is cyclical, and definitely, I think to an extent that maybe not even Packer fans, but NFL fans in general don't appreciate, is how much of it is relationship driven. And so, yeah, I think it's a possibility he could put a word in, etc., but I don't think that'll be a driving force on any signing. But I do think if there is a Seattle guy that they are looking at and or contemplating, then yes, obviously they will turn to Pettin and ask him about it. Michael Bennett to Green Bay, Bobby Wagner. You guys are just throwing out names that you've heard of now. How easy the Eagles got to this. Easy! Should be easy for next year. Adam, I'm glad you put a smiley face at the end of that, because holy cow, was it not easy for the Eagles to get to the Super Bowl this year. In fact, I think Doug Peterson should be in contention for and consideration for, and should probably win Coach of the Year for what he did with that Eagles squad. How are we going to save our run defense? Maybe adding Dez. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Top free agent you want the Packers to sign. I don't want them to sign anybody. I just watch who they sign, and I tell you guys about it. To lead to Green Bay, Bobby was interesting. I know last year there was scuttlebutt kind of rumor mill stuff going around about him possibly being a cap casualty in Denver, and I thought it made a lot of sense for the Packers to look into that. And like I was saying earlier, with Gutekunst, we don't know how he's going to approach the roster. I don't know what Talib's contract status is. I don't know if he will be available. I tend to doubt they go after him, but you never know. You really never know. I want Trey Burton from Philly. Awesome tight end. Andy, I think he's a good tight end. He's a solid player. I'm not sure he's a guy you want to break the bank for, but we'll see. I think he'd be a solid addition. And as we've talked about before here on various Facebook Live sessions, they absolutely need to overhaul the tight end spot in Green Bay. There's no doubt about that. So, yeah, he could be a target. Any good O-line prospects? Jordan, I'm telling you, there's this kid from Humboldt that Daniel Jeremiah and Mike Mayock were talking up today. Started last night on Twitter. They were talking about him on NFL Network today for the Senior Bowl coverage. This kid, I can't remember his last name right now, but he looks violent as hell, and he looks the part. And he was from a smaller school, but early returns are good on the Senior Bowl practice. So when I get the name and I get some little more tape to watch, I will let you guys know. Roquan Smith at linebacker. Adam, you know what? It's funny. I talked to Michael Cohen about this, my colleague at PackersNews.com, who is actually down in Mobile watching the Senior Bowl. And Michael likes him for the Packers. I like him too. And here's the thing. I can't say, again, I'm going to keep saying this all offseason. With Ted Thompson, we knew about his aversion and his kind of devaluing of the inside linebacker spot. I don't know how Gutekunst is going to approach it. Maybe he sees him as a missing piece. I love his game. He is sideline to sideline all day long, and I think he would definitely be an asset for the Packers. Now, where he's going to fall on their board, I don't know. But if they took him at 14, I think that'd be a very solid pick, no doubt about it. Kappa, that's it. Kappa is the guy, is the D3 guy that Mayock and Daniel were talking about today. Tyler Eifert, I don't know, Jason. We'll see. See if he actually hits the market. Will we see more blitzing in this new defense? Joe, I think it'll be a week-to-week thing. I think much more so than Capers. I think Pettin is a guy who game plans week to week. Obviously everyone does that to some extent, some much more than others. Some defensive coordinators and some offensive coordinators are very much, this is our stuff, we're going to run it, you're going to have to beat it. That's kind of how Capers was, and a lot of people beat it, especially if they had really good quarterbacks. But Pettin, at least his track record suggests that he is much more a week-to-week lineup and try to take advantage of weaknesses and highlight weaknesses and go after them. Now, not always successfully, but more often than not, that's what he's done through his time with the Jets and the Bills as defensive coordinator. So I do think it'll depend on who they're facing. If they face a quarterback who really struggles against the blitz, I think you'll see a lot of it. If they see a guy who does a really good job in hot routes, switching up protections at the line of scrimmage, diagnosing things pre-snap, then maybe they call off the dogs and they play a lot more coverage. I think that's what you'll see kind of throughout Pettin's time in Green Bay. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for the questions. I'm sorry I can't stick around any longer. Like I mentioned earlier, I got 3 sick kids inside and got to get to them. So I'll be back tomorrow. We'll have tons of stuff from the Senior Bowl from Michael Cohen. Make sure you're sticking at PackersNews.com for all of that. And everything else. I hear tell that the assistant coaches are going to be introduced tomorrow. So we'll have everything off of that, everything from the Senior Bowl, and everything leading up to the Combine and the Draft. Make sure you're tuning in at PackersNews.com each and every day for all the latest on the green and gold. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a good night.